everybody, it's Claire here from Sewing by Claire, and today we're going to be making the opera coat, Freya's opera coat, although I'm making mine for Luna because I don't have a Freya, but that you can find the pattern for that in the book Luna Lapin Making New Friends, and it's actually this jacket here which is purple velvet. Look at that, it's a really lovely outfit, really high occasion outfit there. You could make it in other fabrics as well, but the kit that I purchased, or was gifted, sorry, from Cool Crafting, which is there. You can just see my pattern pieces in there, and I'll put the website for Cool Crafting up here so that if you want a kit you can get yours too. Then that's what, and it was purchased some time ago, so the price might have changed slightly, but that's where I got the fabric from, and it came as part of the kit for the halter neck play suit for Freya and the opera coat. It was a 2-in-1 kit, so you get both garments. I've already filmed the halter neck play suit, so you'll find that 2-part video on my channel already, but today it's the turn of the opera coat. Now I hoped originally it was going to be 2 sessions, but as you'll see from the Back to the Future video that I'll do in a minute, or a few minutes, that I actually elevated the finish of this garment because I felt that the velvet and the quality of the garment and the design really warranted it. So I hope that you enjoy learning some new techniques with me today that you might not have used before, but which you can apply to lots of other of your sewing in the future. So bear with me. Just remember that when you're watching the videos, you can timestamp it, or there's usually a red line underneath to show you how far through a video you've got. So if you need to stop and come back, you can do quite easily. So let me just show you a couple more pictures of the opera coat. Here it is, that's it. So there's the opera coat in all of its glory. So we've got a lovely full skirt, and there's actually a pleat in a box pleat at the back. We've got these lovely buttons on the front with that double-breasted coat, and then we've got the lovely fitted nice bell sleeves on there as well. So that's how the opera coat finishes off, and it really does look lovely. So if you want to get your kit together or your fabrics together, and then we'll get started. Okay, so in Back to the Future style, I just want to show you the finished coat because we don't quite, and I mean, it looks lovely. I mean, the light will catch the velvet on here, so it'll look more creased than it is. In person, it looks really, really lovely. But I just wanted to show you some of the things where we vary from, well, where I vary from the instructions in the book. Okay, just in case these appeal to you. So on mine, there's no visible stitching around the cuff. On the actual original in the book, you'll see there's a machine stitched hem. So I'll show you how to achieve that. On the inside, we've used something called under stitching in order to neaten off this edge here and around the neck. And that just stops the lining from showing through onto the front of your garment. We've also neatened around the arm side as well, so there's no visible raw edges there. And again, on here, there's no visible raw edges. We're using that lining to encase the seam at the waist, and that's not part of the instructions in the book. So again, it's something an extra for the video. The other thing that I've done as well is I have neatened and made mitered corners on the edges of the jacket, on the edge of the hem like this, rather than just folding it down, folding it in and folding it up. And I think that really does make a lovely elevated edge to that jacket there. So I just wanted to show you those bits now because the video is a long one, but yeah, lovely, lovely coat. So enjoy sewing along with me today. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is turn to the pattern pages in the book, and I've got them marked here. And you're going, it's in the Making New Friends book by Sarah Peel for Cool Crafting. And you're going to turn to pages 134 and 135 and 136, and you're going to trace off using some tissue paper. So just tissue paper like this. You're going to trace off your pattern pieces. Now, you'll have heard me say this time and time again for those that follow me regularly, but if this is your very first video, I always make a tracing paper copy of my pattern so I can keep the master copy, whether it's in a book or a paper pattern, as a master copy in case I lose any pieces. If we cut it out of the book and then we lose it, or in this case the book is actually two-sided, you're going to lose the pattern on the other side. So if you get into the habit of tracing your pattern pieces off on some inexpensive tissue paper, it does add a few minutes to your project, but it will save you money in the longer term. So just take your pattern piece, your tracing paper, put it over your pattern pieces and literally just trace all around. And you're tracing the thick black cutting line, not the dotted sewing line. Generally speaking, in most places it's going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then you're also going to trace off any notches or any notes. So this one says centre back, please place on fold, cut 1 in velvet, 1 in lining, what it is and what it's for. And what you'll end up with is your pieces like this. So there's the sleeves, there's the top, here's the back, and then here's the actual skirt. Make sure you mark your notches on. So we've got those notches marked on here as well. Oops, get it lined up. Okay, and then that will give you your pattern pieces then to work with. Don't forget to trace off the front of the skirt from the other side of the, or the back of the skirt from the other side as well. Okay, once you've got your pattern pieces, we can then turn to the pages in the book, which I've got here. So do try to follow along if I can do, but I do vary if we need to. But here we've actually got a cutting out guide. So on this section here on page 67, and here's another picture of the opera coat that we're going to be making, which you might not be able to see in very good. The lighting's difficult today, sorry about that. Is the layout guide here for how you're going to, and we're going to do this way of double folding the fabric. So I'll show you how to do that as we get going. Now the other thing that I have got is I have got my trusty silk pins with me, because this fabric is difficult to pin through, and if you were working on the play suit with me earlier, the halter neck play suit, then working with the taffeta as the lining, then it is a good idea to have silk pins to hand. They're just narrower, the sort of like the body of the pin is narrower, so they go through delicate fabrics without leaving such a big hole. And they're not a lot of money, but I bought them in the box, and then I keep them in the box so that they're then kept separate from my main pins. Okay, so let's just put the book to one side and let's just get our fabric. And then we're going to have a little look at how this is folded. Now we've got one long piece of fabric here. This is a piece by the width of the fabric. So it's the full width. And then we're going to fold over a small amount here for the back to give us that extra fold. And then the rest of this is going to be folded over this way so that we've got that 2 folds. Now when you're working with velvet, you need to be aware of something called a nap. Now, it's not a grand nap that we all like to have in an afternoon just to recharge our batteries. This is to do with the flow of the fabric, if you like. And if on some fabrics, corduroy and also on velvet and on velour, you will often see something called a nap. What it means is that when you smooth your hand one way down the fabric, it's going to feel beautifully smooth. If you smooth your hand in the opposite direction, your fingers are going to get caught on those fibres because they all lay one way, and then you get this uneven pattern on it. Can you see how that's changing with the uneven pattern from there? So the nap, ideally, I prefer it if the nap is all going down the fabric. So I will make sure that all of my pattern pieces go from the neck to the hem, and I won't have some from neck to the hem and some from hem to the neck. So for example, on a bodice, I would have it from the neck down to the hem, and then if I was working on my sleeves, I would make sure that too went from the neck down to the hem, although it's the top of the shoulder, but still in terms of orientation on the body. I wouldn't then turn this piece of fabric round so that it was going from the hem to the neck, because when I sew with that fabric, it's going to give it a different feel when it's being worn. And sometimes it can make the fabric look as if it's 2 different batch codes. You know, if you buy paint or you buy wallpaper and you get a different batch code, sometimes there can be a slight difference in the colours that are used on that particular batch run, and that's what it can look like. It can just look a little bit off. So if you can make sure that all of your pattern pieces, in the way they're worn on the body from top down, then you'll be able to get this right. So let's just place this one first and just start to get this all organised. So we're going to roll this back until we've got our nice little hem just there. We're going to avoid this dotted line here or punctured line where the selvage edge is. I was trying to find my words then. Where the selvage edge is. And we're just going to use our pins here. Let's just put a pin in just to hold it to get together. And those pins are going through quite nice. Just be aware on these little pieces, sometimes your pins can go over the edge. Make sure that your pattern piece is fitting on properly onto right up to the edge of the fold. And the fold is going to be quite thick. And this fabric is quite springy to work with as well, velvet can be. We'll talk about that later as we start to sew it. So that's got that one piece on for the moment. The sleeves need to wait, the front needs to wait, and then we're going to fold this other section round and up to it. So we're going to put those two edges together there, and let's have a look and see how much fabric we've got. To smooth the fabric out underneath. I think we're going to have plenty, which is great. Make sure that's nice and smooth. Make sure that everything is looking nice. Let's put slightly off grain, but we can work with that hopefully. Okay, so we're going to look, so there's the two fronts and here's our back. Now the back of the coat needs to be placed on the fold, so let's place that one first. We can use the bottom cut edge, just make sure that it's nice and level for the coat on the back here. Hopefully you can see. I mean, I can move it across, but my fabric's going to be over the edge. So I'm just going to match up the edge of the pattern piece with the edge of the fabric and then place my pins. And I just roughly place this at the moment in terms of getting it, I mean, I try and get the edge lined up properly, but only 2 pins will do just for the moment while we're just getting all of this together. And we can butt these right up to each other as well, so we just make one snip between the two of them. They should be the same length. Just make sure that if there is any inaccuracy on the bottom of the cutting here, that we just get that as neat as we can do. And straight. And then we're going to pin this into place as well. Okay, so that's those two on just for the moment. Next we're going to need to put our sleeve in. Let's put that nice and high up here. Make sure we've not gone over the edge. I've got a slight discrepancy, so just move it down slightly. So you'll see me talking about grain lines, but on these smaller garments it's not quite so imperative. And then I'm going to pop another pattern piece perhaps up here, and then that gives us a little piece here then, doesn't it? If we needed it for another project, we could use it for an accent on something. Okay, so let's make sure that front is level for that nap. And then we're going to do just a quick pattern check before we put all of our pins in to make sure that this is all going the right direction. So we have our front going from neck down to hem, the back going, sorry, that was the back, this is the front, from neck down to hem, from neck to hem, and from the waist down as well. So I'm just going to go ahead now and just pop all of these onto my, with proper pins, with more pins, and then I'm going to cut them out. Take your time with your cutting, because velvet has a habit, because of these fibres in the velvet, it has a habit of just shifting slightly whilst you're working with it. So plenty of pins will be your friend, and just take your time while you're cutting it out and all should be well. Okay, I've had a look through the instructions after cutting out all of my pattern pieces, and don't forget that when you were cutting out the play suit, we cut out one of the back and 2 fronts in the taffeta fabric from the same as the play suit, which is going to act as the lining for this garment. So you've got those pattern pieces too. So we've got the skirt back, the skirt front, the 2 bodice pieces, the back and the front, and then we've got the sleeves. You can see how many pins I used as well whilst doing this. Now the instructions say to jump straight into doing the pleat on the back of the jacket, but as you remember when we sewed the play suit, it was difficult to hem it once we'd actually got the pleat in place. So I'm going to change the order around a bit, and I hope that you'll bear with me. I also hope that if you've already made this before but now you're following along with me, that it actually makes sense and that you like the way that I do it. Hopefully that's fine. So we're going to just, before we jump into all of that, let's just mark our pleat. So we're going to need our little notch at the top of the pleat here. Just a little notch. We're going to have to add a tailor's tack in for the bottom of the pleat. And then on the skirt, we've got 2 notches as well. So let's just mark those in place as well so we don't forget those. Make sure you're going through both sets of fabric at the same time when you do your notches. And then we can start and take our pins out, because what we're going to do first is we're going to neaten the edges of the skirt panels first. Yes, we're going to neaten those first. Then we're going to add in our gathering stitches, and then we're going to do the actual pleat after that. So that will all make sense. So let's just get these the right way round. Remember your notches are on the front. So let's turn those. I've got the wrong side up at the moment. Oh, let me just do my tailor's tack, shall we, for that first. Let's get a needle and thread. If you load up a needle and thread with a contrasting colour, I've got a nice white here. We'll just do a little tailor's tack just to mark where that pleat is. And while we're doing it, the other place we need tailor's tacks potentially is on the front of the bodice here to mark where the actual buttons go, because we've got 6 buttons to put on the front of this coat. I should have my glasses on ready for threading, shouldn't I? So to make us tailor's tack, we're going to need a double piece of thread through a hand sewing needle, no knot. We go to the dot that's on the bottom of this pleat, and we're going to take one stitch that goes east to west or west to east, whichever way you want to do it, so across that dot, and we're going to leave a tail of about an inch and a half, and then we're going to take another stitch in the opposite direction. Make sure you go all the way through to the back. You want to be able to see your needle on the back there. And we're going to make a loop this time, but we're going to make the loop about the same length as the tail we left, and then we're going to snip off our threads, leaving our tail as well. I'm just going to show you how to do one, and then we're going to repeat this with us. You then snip through the loop, so you've got a nice tuft of threads going on here on top of your pattern, and on the back you've got a white cross. Just hopefully you can pick that up. What we do then is we can take out our pins. Don't forget I've marked the top of this pleat as well with a snip, just a little snip. When you're making your snips, just do it a millimetre or 2 deep. You don't want to go so far that you're going through your seam allowance, which is 1/4 of an inch, but you want it just so that you can see that notch in the fabric. When you're taking your pattern piece off, just hold on, put your finger onto your threads while you take your pattern piece off, and then your pattern piece can go away. Separate out now your 2 pieces of fabric, and we're going to just pull this apart, not all the way, just gently, so that we don't lose all of the threads, but we want to leave a little tuft of threads on the outside, but we want to create this bridge of threads on the inside there. And when we've got a bridge of threads, we're just going to snip through it. And what that does is it marks the same place identically in the both parts of the fabric, and on the back here, one side you'll have a tuft and one you'll have a little cross. That's just the way that the stitches all form, but that's all fine. And what we can do later is we can match that up together in order to mark that. But because we're going to be doing some neatling first, that's all we're going to do. What I would suggest you do is go back and mark your 6 points on for your buttons on the front of your opera coat as well, with the same tailor's tacks. You can use a erasable pen if should you wish, one of the ones that iron away, or you could use a chalk mark if you wanted. Chalk doesn't tend to be quite so permanent, and sometimes the erasable pen is too permanent, and this is why I favour the old-fashioned way of doing a little tailor's tack in, because they can be quite quick when you're used to doing them, but those threads will pull out at the end once you've finished with those and got your pattern marking, and there'll be no sign of them at all, but they will stay long enough for you to be able to actually see where you want to be sewing in terms of putting those buttons and those press studs on the back. So do just take the time just to make those tailor's tacks on there as well, which I will be doing after the event. We've also, while we're doing our notches, we've got one at the top of the shoulder. Let's just put a snip in there, and then we've got a notch as well on the top front of the jacket as well. Oh, and one on the bottom just there. Okay, none on the back here, and then none on the lining here. So oh no, we will have on the lining, won't we, because it'll match that. So let's just lay the opera coat front over the top of our lining pieces so that they line up perfectly, and then we can just mark that notch in the top just there as well, just to make sure, just again, just a couple of millimetres. Okay, so that's all of our notches marked and everything, and our tailor's tacks done. The next thing we're going to do is get a sample of an offcut of our fabric, and we're just going to test our stitches and test our needle, because this fabric has got a little bit of a slight stretch to it and it's quite tightly woven, so I just want to make sure that my needle is going to work well with this fabric and that it's not going to keep snagging or it's not going to skip stitches. So we'll do that bit next. So bear with me while I get my machine set up and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so let's get a piece of this scrap fabric here. Just find a piece where we can layer 2 pieces up together, and let's just have a go at just stitching down a seam as if you were stitching a seam, and this will test our needle and see how well it copes. Seems to be okay to me, which is good. So I've got a Schmetz Microtex needle in my machine. I think it's a size 70, I think. And that seems to have done a really nice stitch. I can't see any skip stitches there. It might be a little tight because we've got a little bit of indentation if you look. I might loosen off my tension slightly. And that's sitting together really nicely and really firmly. I am going to let off my tension slightly. I'm going to take, it's normally a 5, I'm going to take it down to a 4. And let's just try that seam again. Can you see how it's just kind of pulling in and just rippling slightly? Hopefully you can see that. So let's just try again on another section. That's better. And there, can you see, because of the depth of the pile, just letting off the tension slightly has meant that we're not getting that rippling that we were getting here, and that's sitting nice and flat. It's not too loose, we want to make sure it's not too loose, and there's no skipped stitches, and that's still holding a really nice tight seam, so I'm very happy with that. Okay, if you find that you're getting missed stitches, you might want to try a stretch needle in your machine as well, or a jersey needle. Either of those two you can try, and just see if that gives it any better. You can also try lengthening the stitch slightly, and you can also try letting off your tension slightly, which is how tightly the stitches interlock and hold onto each other, and that should then hopefully give you a lovely smooth seam that you are happy to have on your garment. Okay, so we're happy with the needle, we're happy with the fabric, with the thread, and I'm just using, I've got Gutterman thread in at the moment actually, but just you could use any polyester thread. And what we're going to do now is we're going to zigzag down each side of the garment. So let's put it onto our zigzag stitch. I'm just going to use the setting that it comes on anyway, and we are literally going to zigzag down all of these side seams. If you have an overlocker, you can overlock them, and if you don't have either of those two, then you can use your pinking shears as well with the zigzag blades on them, because that too will stop that from fraying. You're just doing a little edge to then make sure that this isn't going to fray in the future. So just go ahead and do the 2 side seams of the back and the 2 seams on the front, so the 2 edges on the front as well. Don't do the hem at the moment, because I think that won't fray enough that we're going to have to worry about it, and I don't want you to get a ridge when we turn this up with the tape later. So for now I would just edge the side seams. Also, you might notice, I've just noticed, if you turn your fabric over and try and sew it with the velvet side down, you're going to find it's going to catch on your machine. It doesn't want to flow nicely. So always sew with the back of your fabric, the wrong side of your fabric, down onto your machine, and then that should give you a better finish and a better result and a nicer sewing experience. Okay, so I've done my zigzags down each of my sides, and what we're going to do is I've just laid it out now. So I've made sure that my notches are on this left hand side of this skirt front. I've then buttered that up against the back of the skirt with my 2 tailor's tacks just pointing upwards, so that we're getting all the top edge down up. And then I've got my other front of my skirt with the 2 notches, and that's towards the right, so that I know that I've got my orientation right. I can also check the nap and just make sure that that's all flowing down the right way, which it is. So then we're going to fold one skirt front over the other, match up the top. Let's put a pin in, and I pin sort of across this way with my heads sticking out. Let's go down to the bottom and match the bottom. And put another pin in. Now this is counter to how it says in the book, but I'm hoping this is going to be nice for you too when you're making it, and it's going to make sense. But if you follow with me, you'll already have seen the Back to the Future video, so you'll already have seen how this turns out, so you know it will work nicely. Okay, so now we've got that one pinned on. Now let's just go ahead so we don't lose our orientation. So here's my back again, look with the tailor's tacks in it. Here's my front, and this time those 2 notches on the front there need to be towards the right, so that we've got the side without any notches together, and then we're going to fold one over the other, and we're going to again just match top and bottom and pin this into place too. And by working in the flat like this with this skirt, at this point it will just make things a little easier I think, when it comes to pressing and applying that tape, because we've only got one chance to get the Wonderweb tape, iron-on tape correct, haven't we, for the hem of this skirt? Okay, so that's where we are now. So now I'm going to take this to the machine, and with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I'm just going to sew down both of these two sides. I'm going to reverse at the top and reverse at the bottom, and then they will be joined together as one. So let's pop this into our machine, take it off our zigzag stitch. I've still got the tension on my 4.5. I'm going to do a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back, needling my work, and take out a pin. Just adjust myself. Just take your time with your sewing, you don't need to go fast. Reverse at the end. Needle out. Let's cut off our threads. Always cut off your threads as you go along, it makes it much easier for the end. And there we've got our seam. And now we can just finger press this open just by opening those two sides up and just running your fingernail across it, and that will just help that seam stay open. We can press it, but velvet doesn't take to pressing very nicely, so just be aware of that. And if we can manage to just do the pressing that we need without actually having to bring the iron and the heat to it, then we might find we get a better result. Okay, let me do this next stitch here, this next seam here, and then I'll meet you back. Okay, so we're just going to do some marking up on this skirt before we do anything else, just to really get this finish really nailed in. And I hope that you enjoy learning how to elevate your sewing in this way. So on the skirt front, this is our length of our skirt with our two seams, and here's our back tailor's tack. So I've got the wrong side up at the moment, and I've just twisted it round so that I've got one of the front towards me. Now I've measured from the outer front here, and that's 2 cm from the notch, first notch there's 2 notches in there, so the first one, and it's 2 centimeters. Now I'm just going to mark with my chalk pencil, because it's only just temporary, 2 centimeters all the way down the front of this skirt, so it's the skirt of the jacket, isn't it? That's what we're wanting to kind of get. 2 centimeters to the edge. And I'm doing to the edge of the fabric, not to the edge of the zigzagging. So from that notch down, 2 centimeters. Keep it as neat as you can do. Because what we're going to do is we're going to do something called thread tracing. Now thread tracing is really good if you've got any pleats or any folds that you want to mark onto your fabric temporarily, so you can get a really crisp pressing line. And what we do is we take our contrast thread again. This time I'm just going to use this white again. And what we're going to do is we're going to just do a loose running stitch starting at the notch at the hem edge, and we're just going to do some little stitches. So we're going to leave a tail, and we're going to leave a little bridge in between each stitch. If you've got basting thread, you can use basting thread instead. And this is just marking this line for us so we can get a lovely fold, because with the velvet being a little bit bouncy, it can be quite difficult sometimes to get it to fold in the right place for us. And this way we'll just get, as well as the folded line, if that doesn't press quite as nicely as we like, then it's going to at least mark that for us. So we won't be able to see the chalk once we fold this through to the right side. We won't be able to see the chalk mark on the inside, and we can't mark the outside on the chalk because of the pile of the velvet. Okay, that was gone a bit tight. Okay, so we're just going to snip our stitches off, and then we're just going to snip through each of those loops. Okay, so you've got this thread like that over the top of your chalk marks, and then on the other side you've got a nice, excuse that little bit of fluff, you've got a nice line there that we can use to fold, and these stitches will just pull straight out at the end because we've snipped them through. I'm going to do the same on this side here, and then I'm going to do the same at the 3 centimetre mark. It's going to mark again on the bottom hem here at 3 centimetres. This is going to mark the line where our wonder web or our fusible web is going to go inside here. Just mark that and do the same thread tracing along the bottom here, because we're going to do something with the corners to make really nice corners on this coat as well. So some new techniques for you today, but I think working with velvet and working with this lovely coat well, it's Freya's coat, isn't it? But it fits Luna and fits some of the other characters as well. So let's just make this the best we can. Okay, so doing that, and then I'm going to mark down the other, and we're going to have the two sides of the skirt and the hem all marked in this way. I'll meet you back here once you've done that. Okay, so when we finish, we've got I'll show you one side because it's just as easy. We've got the side seam here marked, which is going to, sorry, not the side seam, the front mark, which is going to be our facing. So this little section here is going to end up being the facing that turns around to the front of the coat, so that when it blows open, that's what you're going to see. And then you've also got your hem marked, which then gives you that lovely line to follow when we are pressing this up. So the next thing that we want to look at really for this now is these corners, because if we fold, the fabric's thick, so if we fold in this corner, or fold up the hem first and then fold in the corner, it can be really tricky to get a lovely neat finish on the edge here. I'll zoom in so you can see the fabric sticking out because it doesn't want to fold. And what I want to do is I want to look at whether or not we can do what is a mitred corner, where we fold some section in and then we fold it over the top of each other in order to give this lovely pointy finish. Pointy finish, that's a nice technical term for you, isn't it? But a nice pointed finish into the corner that's going to end right on the edge where those stitches meet. And then we're also going to need to make sure that it's the same on the other side as well. And to do that, we need to cut away some fabric, but we don't want to cut away anything that we want to use for later. So let's just reinstate a solid chalk line just on the bottom here, just at that 2 centimetre mark. So we've still got our tacking threads, which is fine, so leave those in. And then just draw a solid line across onto each of those sections. Try and leave your threads in if you can do. So we get this, let me just go over that a little bit darker. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on the camera. So we've got this white cross, I think you can see it. So a line coming down here and a line going across here. Because that intersection just there, let me get my alt point to you. This intersection just here where those lines cross is going to be the point on the front of the coat when we turn it round. So we want that to be right on the edge of that corner. But we know we've got to turn up the 3 centimetres, and we know we've got to turn in the 2 centimetres, and so it's how do we get that so that that's sitting quite rightly. Okay, I've worked it out. So this is what I wanted to try and achieve for you, is this lovely pointed corner. I hope you can see that going. We've got a slight discrepancy because this is 2 centimetres and this is 3 centimetres, but that doesn't bother me because I've got this lovely edge on the corner of my jacket that is going to sit really nicely, and it's not bulky at all. It's called a mitred corner. So let's see if I can reverse engineer it to show you what I did. So let's start again on the corner. It doesn't matter which corner you're working on. So we're going to reinstate just with the chalk pencil the line that we trace tacked with our thread. So it's 3 centimetres up from the bottom, and it's 2 centimetres in from that side. So we get this lovely cross. Ooh, let me make sure I can mark it like that. Okay. And what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to dissect through this point just here on a diagonal line. So if you can guesstimate that well enough yourself, then that's fine. But what I found was that if I went up from the side, 2 inches from on the side seam, and then I went 1.5 inches in on the other side, along the bottom of the hem. I'll go through that with you in a second, hold on. So we've gone up 2 inches here, so that's on the side seam, and along the hem I've gone along 1.5 inches, and I've just put a chalk mark there and a chalk mark there. And what I want us to do now is to draw a diagonal line that goes from this point here to this point here, and it should transect, that's a big word, isn't it? And I don't even like maths very much. It should just transect just slightly shy, so slightly just a little bit off that corner mark. So when you get to that point, just draw in that diagonal line. I'll show you what it looks like in a second. Just move that piece of thread. Right, so we've got a mark here which is 2 inches up, and we've got a mark here which is 1 1/4 inches in. And if you look on the very centre just there, let me use my awl again, just here, there's my crossover for my point, and I'm just slightly, only like 1 millimetre or 2 to one side of it. I don't mind that, that's fine. What I want you to do then is take a pin and put it right the way through on that on where those 2 lines transect, just in the middle there. Well, 3 lines now, isn't it? Just on that point there, because that's going to be the point that we want our coat to be, just here. Don't put it anywhere else, just put it through, just so it's just poking through like that. Then we're going to fold the fabric right sides together, and we're going to find with a pin. So we're going to first put a pin through this side where the diagonal line is that we've drawn, and then through the other side. Now they're not going to match up completely because one's slightly longer than the other, but we need that pin to be on the fold of wherever they are. Just get mine just right. Okay, well, they do pretty much match up. Okay, and then I'm going to put that pin in again. And what I want you to, so I've got the pin there. Oh, it's not quite on the corner, is it? Come on, Claire, you can do this. So the red pin, which is here, oops, the red pin there is just poking directly through the hole. I've not got it sort of the other end of it poked into anything. It's just going through on that point, because I wanted to make sure that that point's right on the fold line here. Okay, and then what I've done is I've lined up this diagonal line and that diagonal line, which is now covered by the pin, in order that they're lying on top of each other. And what we're going to do now is take it to the machine, and we're going to take out that pin on the red pin on the edge, take that one out because we've marked our point, and start right on that edge, and you're going to sew just slightly more, so where the line comes towards you and you've got your point of your fabric here, we're going to sew slightly towards the edge of the skirt, but only by 1 millimetre or so. So let's just pull this pin forward so we're not sewing on our pins. Let's take a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back, and then needle in the work. Okay, and then we can then, as we sew forward, we can move this pin backwards. So we're going to keep the fabric on top of each other with your hand. You can take your pin out, and we're just going to just sew just slightly to the, because the chalk mark's quite thick, just slightly to the skirt edge of that, and then reverse on the end. Oops, take the pin out, the needle out, and then we're going to cut off our starting and our stopping threads. Before we cut anything off, we always check things like this. So in order to do that, we're just going to fold this point so that it goes through to the other side. And I can see that my 2 edges are lining up nicely. And then if I fold this down onto our cutting mat, we can see that we've got a lovely diagonal edge there, and the point is pointing down, so we've got that lovely edge. What we need to do now, again, before we chop anything off, is we need to match it to the other side. So fold your facings in towards each other, match the skirt edge and your notches, and then let's go down to the bottom and make sure that both of our side seams are both exactly the same, because they've got to match at the front, and they are on mine, so I'm happy with that. If it's not, come back, push out on that. Yeah, this is the one with the fabric in it. So push this one out again. You see we've not cut off that triangle yet. If I show you this one, I've already cut the triangle off that one. So let's just push that one back through on itself, so that one's where it should be. So if it's not right, or you've got a bit of extra fabric, say it's not sitting flat, see how this one is sitting flatly when I'm going to press it on the edges. If yours is wanting to not sit flat, then you're going to need to take slightly more fabric out. So just before you take out your other stitches, just run another row of stitches just closer slightly into your skirt. If you find that that corner is too tight and it's bunching up and it's distorting your hem or your side seam, you've sewn too generously. And in that case, then you're going to have to sew a little bit more towards the triangle and then take out the original stitches. But if you keep your original stitches in until you've sewn your new line, you'll be able to see where you are. Once you've got yours, so that when you test it, it's sitting lovely and flat, which I think I'm going to say mine is. And if you can see, my skirt actually matches perfectly there, doesn't it? I don't know why it didn't match perfectly on this one. Anyway, I'm not going to worry too much. Then once we've done that, then we can go back inside and we're going to cut off the triangle. Remember to leave 1/4 inch seam allowance. So take off that, leaving 1/4 inch seam allowance like that. And then I just take off a smidge more into the corner, not quite down to my stitches, but just take off the bulk of that corner just like that. So that's what it's going to look like at the end. So we've got a little flat edge here and a flat edge there. So that then when we sort of separate out that seam allowance and push it through, you're going to have this lovely mitered edge on the end here. So now once we've got that done, what we can do, and I know that's a lot of work, but look at the finish. I mean, it's just so much nicer than it would have been. So let's now have a think. We have got in our kit, if you've got a kit, oh, where's my buttons gone? There they are. Sorry, my apologies. All the crinkling. In my kit, I have got Wonderweb. So if hand sewing isn't your thing, you can use this fine mesh of glue. And what you can do is you can place the glue on that edge where you've got your threads and then fold it over. Make sure you go right into your corner. You might have to just make sure that sits nicely in the corner. And then you're then going to then use your iron with a press cloth to press that in. Just make sure that you've got it nicely covered all the way along the line. Try not to get any creases in your fabric because once you've used this Wonderweb, it stays there. And just make sure that you press your seams open on your side seams so they will hold up nicely. And this will stick up for want of a praise, it will fix the hem for you nice and neatly, but you've just got to be careful with it, and that you can follow your thread traced line of stitches for you to get that right on the edge for you. The other way of doing it is to do a hand stitch called a herringbone stitch, and I'll show you how to do that in case you want to do the herringbone stitch, because I quite like doing a herringbone stitch, which probably makes me quite sad, but anyway. And what we're going to do then is we're going to fold up the 3 centimetres and we're going to put in a pin about halfway through that. So like that on each of these sections, because we want to work just inside the edge of the coat. I haven't zigzagged this long edge because I don't think it needs it. I don't think it's going to fray enough to be of concern. But that thread tracing does make it very easy to be able to see where your measurements are and where you need to be attaching this hem of this skirt. Seam allowance is open. And that's got that to there. Okay, so all the way along just got those pins, but if you look, oh, I've done those too high, look. We're going through the middle of the hem, not towards the top of the hem, so towards the middle, because we want to be able to fold this back slightly to be able to get inside and it'll hide our stitches. We're then going to use, I'm going to use the last of this Gutterman thread that I've got on this reel. Take a length of your thread, whoops, and a hand sewing needle. I want quite a fine one. And we are just going to thread that up. Oh, first time, that's good on camera, isn't it? Not often that happens. And we're going to put a knot in the end of our thread. What we're going to do is we're going to just fold this back slightly and we're just going to take a couple of stitches into the edge of this facing in order to get this thread just anchored down. Okay, you with me so far? I hope so. Well, that hem's just not quite up far enough. Let me just make sure it's right. Don't want to have to undo all of this. Right, okay. So we're starting, I'm right-handed, so we're going to start at this edge. We're going to fold back the edge of the hem so we can expose it. And we're going to take one stitch with our needle pointing towards the left through the fibres only, just a few fibres on the back of the velvet. So just a little stitch like that. And your needle's always going to be pointing towards the left, which doesn't feel right. It feels like it should be going the opposite direction and towards the way you're sewing, but it's not going to do that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move along about 1 centimetre, and we're going to take a couple of threads from the top, similar to where we are, but from the actual, just the hem. Can you see just the hem? It's a bit like doing a ladder stitch a little bit in that you're using one side of your fabric at a time. And take a stitch, again with your needle pointing away. Then we're going to come back and we're going to take a little stitch again out of some of the fibres on the back of the velvet. You only need a couple, only 2 or 3 look like that, really tiny. Yeah, I think you can see that. And then we're going to take that stitch. So you're going to do this stitches one at a time. It is a slow stitch, but you can get quicker at it when your thread doesn't tangle up like mine has. More stitches for you. So because I finished last time on my skirt, I'm now going to go through the hem section. You can take a bigger bite through the hem section when you want to. And then we're back through the section on the skirt. And what you're going to get is this little crisscross stitch, which I will show you in a few moments when I've done a few more. And it's going to be quite a loose stitch that's going to hold this hem in place, but without being so tight that it hopefully shouldn't be visible on the front. If it is visible on the front after I've done these few stitches, I'm going to go back and use the hemming tape just for as quick and easy. My thread keeps knotting, so I've probably put it on the wrong way round onto my needle. So this is a herringbone stitch. Because sometimes when you do an ordinary hemming stitch, it can be just a little bit too tight. Okay, let me just show you what this looks like. You can see it's just damaging the hem slightly. So on the edge here, if I go like that, you can see those stitches. Yeah, I think so. You see that thread. And then on the other side, it's almost invisible in terms of how that is holding that up. So I'm going to continue because I think I can continue to make that look nice all the way along. So I'm going to continue with that stitch all the way along. Just keep folding that hem back and going through the back of the skirt first with my needle pointing towards the edge, so away from me and away from the sewing, and then this side. You will get quicker as it becomes more intuitive to you, but you just get this little crisscross pattern on the back, which means that it won't hold your thread, the hem won't be held so tight that it marks the front of your fabric. Okay, let me just take a half hour just to do this. I won't let you watch me because obviously that would make the video far too long, but I do, you know, again, all these little extra things are things that you might not have seen before. And, you know, yes, you can run a row of machine stitching along to put your hem up if should you wish. Yes, you can just do turn the corners the way it says in the book. But if the joy in the sewing is in the journey, then this is where you can elevate and add these little tips and tricks that elevate your hem and just make things just look really, really lovely for you. So I hope you've enjoyed it anyway. It's a little bit of couture sewing for you really on these tiny garments, but I think in some ways it is worth it. So I'm going to continue all the way along to the end here in exactly the same way, and then after that we're going to give this a nice press with a press cloth. Okay, so once you've finished doing all of that, your hem. Now just to say as well that I did just use the same stitch just to tack down these facings as well on those folded edges on the front and the back, because they can be tacked down too. So now we've got our hem all nicely laid. Now we just need to give it a quick press, and I do highly recommend that you use a press cloth of some sort, because this is a speciality fabric and it will damage. I'm using silk organza because you can see through it, and you can buy silk, it's real silk organza, and you can buy it's quite stiff, but I've just edged it with either a zigzag or with I've actually done an overlocker, but it just gives you a nice amount of fabric. You can just buy a metre or half metre, and we're just going to just press our seams. I've got a little bit of steam on and a warm iron. Probably might be a little bit too warm. Let's just have a look. It's pressing quite nicely, and yeah, all my stitches are invisible on the other side. I'm going to press my seams open on the skirt as well, and I'm just pressing rather than ironing, just to help that all lay in place. And just be careful, because you're working with a polyester fabric, you're not working with a cotton fabric, and that can sometimes have a mind of its own. So just make sure that you're using your tacking stitches on your thread tracing, that's the word I wanted, on your side, on your hem, just to make sure that that's all on the bottom, so we keep a nice even hem all the way along. And it doesn't matter whether you've used your fusible web or whether you've used your hand stitching to do this, it'll all work out nicely. So I've press that from the inside. I'm not going to press it from the outside, because I can already see that you can see a little bit of an outline of where that hem is, and some of that is inevitable, nothing I can do about that. But once I've done this, I'm going to leave some of the upper thread tracing in place, but then I'm just going to pull out these stitches that we've done for our thread tracing, and they just come out really easily on the edges. And just take all of those out all the way along the edges. They've served their purpose now. So that one there's got stuck through some machine stitching, so I'll just snip that one off very close to the edge. Make a little pile of your stitches, and then they will just come out all nice and neatly for you to put to one side. Okay, so the next stage then that we're going to work on, the skirts, oh no, we've got to do our pleat first, haven't we? Let's do our pleat first. And then that will be it for stage 1, and then we'll move on to our bodice in the part 2 video, because I'm sure that I've done more than enough time on this video already with showing you these new techniques, and then it'll just break it up for you at that natural point. So let me just get these thread tracings out, and then we'll do the pleat, and before we put our iron away, and then we'll be all ready then to start on the bodice. Okay, so I've got my machine ready. So we're going to take a pin first, and we're going to put it fabric so that it's right sides together. We're going to find the 2 notches at the centre back on the top here, which we've got to mark our pleat, and we're going to put a pin across the back there. And then we're going to take a pin, we're going to put it through the centre of our tailor tack on one side, and we want it to come through the centre of our tailor tack on the other. So just keep adjusting your fabric until you come through right on the centre of your tailor tack. And then when you do, just without taking that pin out, just fold the other end in so you've got that marked. And then we're going to sew from that notch down into the centre of the tailor's tack and reverse at the start and the stop. Oh, we've got to add our gathering stitches as well, haven't we? I need to remember to do that. So get your machine lined up and all ready to go. Let's take that first pin out once we know where we are. Let's take a couple of stitches forward, a couple of stitches back, and then sew down to our tailor's tack. Put your needle in your work if you're going to stop, take your pin out, then middle of that tailor's tack, and then just reverse. Needle out, let's take our threads off the top, and then we're going to use a pin or a quick unpick or something like that to pull out the threads from our tailor's tack. So we just use the back of the thread, make sure not to snag your fabric, so we don't want to do that, and these should just pull out quite easily. And because it's a different colour, that's why we usually use a different colour for our tacking threads, then it just pulls out and you know which bits to pull and which bits not. If you've got one where it's a bit stiff and it doesn't want to pull out, it might be that it's got sewn in. So all we do then is we just snip it off close to our threads or our fabric, open up, there should be another end inside somewhere, and then we can just give it a little pull and that will just release the threads. It just means that you've just sewn through a thread. Just have a look inside your pleat, make sure there's no thread still there. And then what we're going to do then is where the fold is, we're going to smoosh, I used this word before, didn't I? Smoosh that fold so that the pleat is equal on the front and on the back. Can you see how that's been smooshed down? Hopefully you can. And then I'm going to just make sure the raw edges are straight together. We're going to put that into the machine. You can pin it if you want, but it's small enough. And then about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge, so within the seam allowance, just going to put a few stitches just to hold that pleat together. Take our stitches off, so there we are, right on the very edge just there. And that's just holding that pleat just nice and flat. Okay, so before we put our iron away, let's just press this pleat. So you're going to need your ironing mat again and your press cloth. Let's lay our coat skirt down. Let's make sure our sides are nice and even. And we're just going to push that, sort of get that pleat to sit nicely in place on the bottom. So you're trying to make sure that at the bottom here, the size of the pleat is about the same at the top there. You can fold it over just to make sure that it's right, but then get it nice and straight. And then we're going to press, not iron, on here. And I'm using very little steam actually. I'm just using heat really just to put this in. I don't want to leave it in any one place for too long. I don't want to spoil or scorch my fabric, and the press cloth should help with that. Okay, so there we've got the pleat just neatly folded in there. So that just looks nice and neat. So I'm going to put that iron away for the moment. And then we're going to go back to our sewing machine, and because we've got to put some gathering stitches along the edge here, we're actually going to change our thread colour. Now I go on to my cream colour, and I'm going to change the bobbin and the top thread because we're going to make our gathering stitches. And as I said, this enables you to be able to be confident that when you're pulling on a thread, it's one of the ones that you want to be taken out of your garment, not something that wants to stay in. So that's always a useful thing to do. So let's just thread the machine up, and if you've got a needle threader on your machine like I have, some of the older machines don't have them, or the more basic machines, but it really does speed up threading your needle, especially if your eyesight is not quite as good as it used to be. It can take a lot of the pressure out. So as you can see, that doesn't take very long at all. And now what we're going to do is we're going to loosen off our tension. So I'm currently at a 4, I'm going to take that down to a 1.5. And I'm going to go to my stitch length, I'm currently at 2.2, and I'm going to take that up to a 3.5, just so that these stitches are working well. And we need to gather from, so here's one of our fronts, we've got a notch on the front, we're going to gather from that notch to the side seam and stop. We're then going to gather across, I think it's all the way across the back for the, yes, all the way across the back here, including the pleat, to the other side seam, and then break our threads. And then we're going to then come across and do the other side. And we're going to do 2 rows of stitching. So we want to do one slightly less than the seam allowance. No reverse, make sure you've got some threads on the end so that you can pull them. Okay, leave some tails. So that's 1 row. And then we're going to move those threads out of the way, and we're going to do another row. And the idea is that when we stitch our gathering stitches, we'll stitch in between these 2 rows of stitches. But for now, to get that ready for gathering, we just need to do 2 rows of stitching like that with our threads left out at the end. So if you've got a machine that cuts your threads, you're going to need to switch that off just for this section. And so we're going to do the exact same thing across all the back and then across here, but in different sections. I'll come back to you once we've done that. Okay, so here we go, 2 rows of stitching, across one front, across the back including the pleat. Just make sure your pleat's lying flat, and across the other section. Now, so I'm going to leave it here now for the first part, and then we're going to go on to the bodice. But don't change your threads out of the machine, because the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the gathering stitches on top of the sleeves whilst we can, just so that that's all done. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed stitching along with me for this part 1. If you've not given the video a thumbs up already, please do if you've enjoyed it. And if you want to leave me a comment, let me know how you found the video, then I'd really appreciate hearing from you. And if you're not a subscriber and you'd like to be, I'd love to hear from you and know that you're following me along. So thank you for today, and I'll get back on to the part 2 video.